Okay, Photoshop. So this is going to be a really fast, really crash course of the very basics of some photo touch-up in Photoshop. There's a lot more you can do, and we'll learn about more of that in Photo 1, but even more in Photo 2. But what I'm going to show you today is going to get you far enough to make any sort of correction, basic correction, to a photo. So you want to find your photo, whether it's in Finder or on the desktop or wherever it might be. Right-click, open with Adobe Photoshop. And here we are. So a basic layout of what you're going to see here is, of course, your photo. This is from the Fall Play in 2019. You have your tools over on the left. And then as you select different tools, you'll notice at the top, the menu and the options for those tools change depending on the tool. Over on the right, we have some adjustments, and we have our layers. A critical part of Photoshop are our layers. Layers are going to be stackable images or edits, and you'll see how that's going to work here in a minute. Then something else useful here is our histogram. Okay, this charts out how much of color and value there is from pure black to pure white. And as you can see already, this photo is a little dark, and we're not getting any of that brighter colors. If it doesn't look like this for you, go to Window, Workspace, and then I usually either use Essentials or Photography. But if you're ever looking for something you don't see, here's all the different things. Your tools, our histogram, our layers are all checked. And there's many more things you could turn on it, but we really won't need much of that. So I'm going to take you out of this main interface and send you to kind of this side interface, which is for basic edits. We'll come back and maybe make some more changes with the tools, but what we're going to do first is go to our layers. So our background layer is like our first starting photo, but I don't want to mess with that. If I mess that up, then I don't have any backup. So what I'm going to do is right click on it, and I'm going to duplicate the layer. Yep, that's fine. So now I have the background, which will be untouched. We're not going to ever touch that. And then I have a copy of it that's sitting on top. So now it's like I have two photographs, identical, one's on top of the other. And the top one's the one we're going to mess with. With the top one selected, go to Filter, and then down here to Camera Raw. See where it says Last Filter? This will be whatever filter you use last. It's possible that if you do Camera Raw twice, it would say Camera Raw up here and down here. Don't click on this one, it'll just do what you did last time again. You want to go all the way down to a new one, Camera Raw Filter. Camera Raw Filter is designed to edit raw images right out of the camera. So you can see how that would apply to us. All right, so a whole new interface here and a whole new window. Now we have just a few tools up top and a bunch of adjustments. In fact, all these adjustments are just the basic tab. We have a bunch more after that. But we're going to get so much done so fast. Probably the best thing to tackle first here is either our white balance or exposure. I like the idea of doing exposure for this first because it's so dark. So exposure is going to control how light or dark an image is. In fact, all of these are going to control how light and dark and how much contrast there is, this whole category here. You can start off with just going auto, and that'll usually get you better. But rarely does it get you all the way. I'm going to go back to default so we can play with them individually. The other thing that's going to be really helpful here is our histogram. Different monitors are set to different brightnesses, but with our histogram, I can see, am I actually getting where I want to be? And I'm definitely not. What you want to see, and it depends on the photo, is a little bit of pure black, a little bit of pure white, and kind of a bell curve. This is a pretty sloppy bell curve, but a bell curve. And depending on the photo, that might not be realistic at all. But this is certainly much better. We can improve it further, though. I could increase the contrast, which will make the darks darker and the lights lighter, which we don't really want to do. This is already pretty contrasty. Highlights, I can pull my highlights lighter. Highlights are going to be in this window right here. Shadows, darker shadows, lighter shadows. Don't really need to mess with that too much. My whites, I do want to bump my whites a fair bit still. All right, that's looking better. We can go back and do some localized adjustment as well. I I think I do want to just bump it all a little bit more here, though. Up in these corners of the histogram, it's your highlight clipping warning. So see everywhere that turned red? It's not really red. It's just warning me, hey, that area blew out pure white. You're losing detail. And I'm okay with just tiny bits of it. And we'll get the same thing in our shadow clipping warning. So let's drop our blacks till we get, right? See that? Everywhere that's blue is pure black. And that's kind of what we want it to look like. All right. Well, we're already making some good progress here. Let's go ahead and tackle the white balance. So this is how warm or cool the picture is. I am quite confident that this is white cloth, but that is not white in this photo. It's close, but it's not white. It is too warm. See, I've made it worse there, but that's what we're trying to correct. We're actually going to shift it to be cooler. You know, you can obviously go too cool, but just a little bit here is going to help a whole bunch. Now, with that done, all the color seems a little dull. I mean, it's not a super colorful thing apart from her blues, but let's scroll down. I should say that sometimes you'll need to correct for tint as well if things look a little greenish. You probably could go just a few touches that way. Scrolling down, we have texture, clarity, dehaze. These are basically different strengths and scales of the same thing. Let me zoom in here. So this isn't a perfectly sharp image. You know, the auditorium, relatively speaking, is fairly dark. But if I crank up texture, you can see it brings out those little details, makes subtle differences more extreme. Clarity will do the same thing, but even heavier handed. And goodness, dehaze is gonna really be bulk lightening and darkening. We don't want that. We probably want to do just something like that. It gives the appearance sometimes of bringing out texture and sharpening a photo, although it doesn't really sharpen it. Going over the top can have a weird effect. Now, let's look at our color. So we have two sliders for colors. One's vibrance and one's saturation. They both deal with the intensity of color. However, the difference being that saturation deals with all colors. Intense or neutral, saturated or dull. So you can see the skin color went up, the clothing color went up, or conversely, everything will go to black and white. Vibrance will deal with the more neutral colors. So it's just a little bit gentler of a change. So that's that turned up all the way, and that's that turned down all the way. We probably want to bump the overall color quite a bit, but if their skin gets a little orange, which it has, we can drop this some. So you'll just play back and forth with them. Moving on, there's not a whole bunch that you're going to need out of the rest of this. I do like in the detail tab, the third tab, there's sharpening, but it's not very good. What is good is the noise reduction. So we can see that because it was a fairly dark image in a fairly dark setting, that there's this graininess. It almost looks like the photo was printed on sandpaper. That's called noise. And if I use this luminance slider under noise reduction, Photoshop can do an amazing job of reducing that. Let's just slowly, well, actually, no, forget slowly. Let's crank it up all the way. And you can see it has completely removed any sense of graininess, although it's really kind of smoothed out a lot of detail. What I like to do then is just go back until I am comfortable with the amount of noise and getting as much detail as possible. And that's pretty good. I mean, we were zoomed in a whole bunch. All right. Anything else we want? So, yeah, like this. This is good. HSL stands for hue, saturation, luminance. In this area, I can change colors. So blue dress becomes teal dress or purple. Saturation, the intensity of the blue. Very blue, quite dull blue. Let's turn that up some. And luminance, do I want the blue to be lighter or darker? Lighter or darker? It doesn't really matter too much. other useful things. The last one is presets. I find a lot of these to be a bit much. I do like some of the black and white ones, if that's what you're going to do. But you could choose a preset and then make changes afterwards, which I almost always would recommend. I guess at the very beginning on the basic tab, if you did want to go to black and white, you could just click from color to black and white. And then here you would then just play with your exposure and whatnot. Also in black and white mode, your hue, saturation, and luminance slider switches to just how bright or dark something is. We'll stay in color. All right, that's going to get you really far, and you can see before and after. A lot of changes, but we can do even better. These tools we saw up here, we have the magnifying glass tool, which you've seen me use. You have a couple other ones that I really don't think is going to apply to most of our first sort of projects, except for these last three. The adjustment brush, the graduated filter, which is the same thing, and the radiated filter. The adjustment brush has all these changes: exposure, highlights, saturation, all that stuff, but in a brush form. And I can change the size of my brush and the feather, which is basically how it blends into the edges. And I can brush in an adjustment. And I didn't do very much there, but I can go back. Oops. Select that and then go back. Okay, maybe we'll try one more time sliding it this way. Yeah, grabbing the slider and too bright, just a little bit brighter here. I could do a new one and say this time I want you to focus on brightening the shadows. And maybe I say that's too much. I can erase to get rid of one as well. And if you hover over this, you can see the area being affected. In fact, you can just turn on the mask there. Of course, if you totally messed up, clear them all out right here. Similar is the gradient. I'll just do an extreme example so you can see. If you click and drag, it'll do a gradient. Okay, I don't really want that, obviously. And the radial one, click and drag, it does the effect on the inside or the outside. Don't go super cheesy with this, please. You know, like, let me show you what super cheesy looks like. I would say in both cases, just do it so you don't notice it. Like, if you did want to do that, help draw attention into the middle, do something like that where you won't really notice it. Otherwise, it, again, looks cheesy. All right, so once you're done and happy with your edits, click OK. You've got your edits done. Now, I did forget one thing. If before I had gone into that, I right-click and click Convert to Smart Object. Should have done this, but I forgot. What that would allow me to do is go then Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and my settings would have been there still. I could make an adjustment. Ooh, I like how bright that is. Click OK. And then I'm like, ooh, that's too bright. I now have the option of going back to that camera raw adjustment and knocking it back down some. Of course, because we always had the background layer, we weren't totally out of luck, but I really should have remembered to convert it to a smart filter. No, I'm sorry, smart object before doing the camera raw filter. It just potentially saves you. Last few things with the tools. We have a crop tool. If we want to crop something, hit the check mark to confirm. Other good ones, magnifying glass again for zooming in and out. And the other one that I like a lot, gosh, do you really need anything else? No, I mean, this is going to get us really far. Spot healing brush tool. Let's zoom in on an area that we want to get rid of a spot. I don't see any real problems anywhere, but I'll just show you. I can get rid of this button, okay? With the spot healing brush tool, and it's not going to let me do it because it's a smart object. So if you do want to do it on this layer, which you do want to do it on this top layer so we can actually see it, it's going to ask you, do you want to rasterize it or make it not a smart object anymore? And yeah, you'll have to do that. So, okay. Up here, I'm going to change my brush size. And now I just have to brush over, and you can see it highlighting that area, an object, and then it's going to remove and blend all in one step for you. All right. Depending on what you want to do, it works usually really well, but there are some exceptions to that. So I think that's all that you're going to need for your first few projects to get going. All we need to do now is save it. And we're going to go File, Save As. Not Save, Save As. Last name. Then the assignment, which in this case we'll call Practice. I don't care where you save it to. If you save it to the desktop, just understand that that's not really a secure location. You might save it to the desktop and then upload it to Google Drive. Format. Photoshop's great if you want to continue working on it. It'll save all of your layers and settings. But when you're done, switch to JPEG. And it should automatically change that to .jpg. Hit save. And you want to have the JPEG options as the maximum and hit OK. You'll upload that to wherever you need to, whether it be Google Drive or Canvas or probably both. And yeah, you should be good to go. All right.